people that elite class, all right? Now, what kind of material are they using here? Now, we have these bricks that are made out of limestone. Where do we find limestone here, guys? Where do you think we find limestone? It's actually everywhere. It's all over the Yucatan Peninsula.
On the ground.
Yucatan Peninsula is sitting on a limestone shelf, literally, guys. That's why we have so many underground rivers. Limestone is a very porous stone, and with all the rain we get here, especially this time of the year, it all filters through and it creates these underground rivers that connect throughout the whole Yucatan Peninsula. They've even used chemicals that they've poured into some cenotes, and they've been able to trace those chemicals all the way on the other side of the peninsula, about 400 kilometers, so like 200 miles away approximately. So they're all connected, guys, okay? But anyway, the Mayas used to extract these limestone blocks out of a quarry, and then they would place those big blocks inside an oven under the ground, and they would bake it for several hours until it became a chalk. Once it became a soft chalk, guys, they would crush it right inside that oven and mix it with all the ashes of all the fire at the bottom, and then they would pour in tree sap, honey, and water and make a cement. And that's what's keeping together all these blocks of limestone, guys, okay? Now the blocks of limestone were also baked underneath the ground for a few hours, so that way they would harden. So it's kind of like hardening clay in a kiln, right? It's kind of the same process. But what's keeping the stones together is that cement we've been talking about. Now a lot of people have criticized the Book of Mormon just for the fact that it says cement several times. But what is cement made out of, guys?
Rock.
Limestone.
Limestone. And here in the Yucatan Peninsula we have an abundance of limestone. And we have the lime that's cement requires. Mm-hmm. So thanks to that process, guys, these guys were able to make some very sturdy and durable houses. And you want to make sure you live in a house like this because you live right in front of the sea, and we get hurricanes here every year around this time of the year, right? So you want to have a nice durable house that can resist the hurricanes and storms. Mm-hmm. So these guys thought about all that. Now anyway, if you guys look at the walls too, look how thick the walls are. Pretty thick, right? About almost 3 feet thick, like this first wall here on the left. So that was so that your walls would be insulated, and that way your house wouldn't be hot all the time. If you have really thick walls, guys, typically your house is going to be nice and cool inside your house. And then if you leave some openings on the wall, some small windows, you'll have some circulation going on. But the best thing here, guys, was that the houses had these tall pitched roofs that were covered with this palm leaf that we have right next to us. It's known as the guano palm leaf. Now this is one of those ancestral techniques the Mayas discovered and passed on from generation to generation. But the Mayas discovered that if you cut this leaf on a full moon, your leaves can last up to 13 years. So that means that these leaves, when you tuck them inside that roof, guys, it can last 13 years. It's kind of like shingles, right? So you don't have to replace them until another 13 years if you cut them on the right night. Okay?
What difference does that make?
Now the scientific explanation to this, guys, is that the trunk of the tree creates a sap, just like every tree around here, but the difference is on a full moon, the sap actually travels up and all the way to the tips of the leaves. So if you cut the leaf on that night, the sap is trapped inside, and that naturally varnishes the inside of the leaves.
We're smart people.
That's what's going on here, guys. So that's how the Mayas used to live. They had these beautiful houses that they would cover with a stucco. If you look at the walls inside, they still have the original stucco. Imagine all these houses nice and flat and everything neat and perfect, guys, okay? Imagine these houses even painted. Every house had nice paint, had blue, red, lots and lots of color, guys.
So that flat part is original? People didn't put that there to keep the bricks together?
What part?
The flat, like the stucco?
You see over there? No, that's all original.
Wow.
Some of the houses, it's fallen off over time, but the inside walls usually still have the original stucco. So I mean, these guys were definitely not living in a survival mode like the Native Americans were most times. The Native Americans a lot of times were being chased out by other tribes, and they're a bit more barbaric. You know, they didn't have enough time to really discover these things because they're being chased out of everywhere all the time. But here, these guys were definitely established. They understood their environment. They understood that they had to live in durable houses like this, and they even had the time to think about decoration. I mean, to say this year I'm going to paint my house red because that's my favorite color now. I mean, to have that time to think about those details that aren't so important sometimes, and that means that these guys were a much more superior tribe. Okay? Now the last thing about these houses is that every house you're going to notice that they're elevated from the ground. Have you guys noticed that? And a lot of times we think it's because of the floods, but the real reason is because every house needed a space for a basement. The Mayas were very similar to the Chinese in the sense that they wanted to stay in contact continuously with their ancestors. And to do so, they needed to have their ancestors buried somewhere close. Well, guess where they used to bury them, guys? Right in their basements, exactly. So that first story that you see in the house, guys, is really a basement. The rest of it is still buried underneath the ground because keep in mind, everything has changed here over the course of time. But the norm back then was to elevate your house 6 feet. So that first story of 6 feet is the basement. Okay, so you had plenty of room for you to walk inside and leave a tomb or a coffin from time to time. Okay, but those tombs, let me show you what they look like.
I wanted to do that when we built our house.